The dense forest of the Land of Fire was eerily silent, the usual chirping of birds replaced by an oppressive stillness. A thick mist clung to the ground, swirling around the towering trees as if alive. Naruto Uzumaki crouched low on a branch, his bright blue eyes narrowed in focus, his whisker-marked face tense with anticipation. The Kyuubi's chakra thrummed beneath his skin, a familiar warmth that promised power, but also danger. He wasn't alone. Across the clearing, a figure stood motionless, their silhouette distorted by the shifting shadows. The Puppetmaster. This wasn't just any enemy. Reports had spoken of a rogue shinobi who commanded not just puppets but the very darkness itself, bending it to their will like a second skin. Worse still, whispers claimed they had somehow enslaved a Jinchuriki, twisting the beast's power into a weapon. Naruto's fists clenched. He knew better than anyone the agony of being used, of having a monster sealed inside you. He wouldn't let another suffer the same fate. A cold laugh echoed through the trees, sending a shiver down Naruto's spine. The Nine-Tails host, the Puppetmaster mused, their voice a distorted whisper, as if spoken through a dozen mouths at once. How convenient. Shadows coiled around their arms like serpents, writhing with unnatural life. Behind them, a massive figure lurched forward, a Jinchuriki, their eyes hollow, their body bound in chains of darkness. The air grew heavy with malice, the beast within them snarling in trapped fury. Naruto didn't wait. With a burst of chakra, he launched himself forward, kunai flashing in his grip. The Puppetmaster barely twitched. Shadows erupted from the ground, forming a wall of inky tendrils that swallowed Naruto's strike whole. He flipped back, landing in a crouch as the shadows lashed out like whips. One grazed his arm, searing like ice. Gritting his teeth, he formed a rapid sequence of hand signs. Wind style, Rasengan. The spinning sphere of chakra shrieked in his palm, its razor wind slicing through the shadows, but they reformed instantly, thicker, hungrier. The Puppetmaster raised a hand, and the enslaved Jinchuriki lunged. A fist wreathed in dark flames crashed toward Naruto. He barely dodged, the shockwave uprooting trees behind him. The Jinchuriki's movements were jerky, unnatural, as if their strings were being pulled. Naruto's heart ached. This wasn't a fight they wanted. He had to free them. Channeling Kurama's chakra, golden flames erupted around him, his pupils slitting into fox-like slivers. The Puppetmaster's grin widened. Ah, the beast awakens. Shadows pooled at their feet, surging forward in a wave. Naruto met them head-on, his Rasengan slamming into the darkness with a deafening roar. The clash sent shockwaves rippling through the forest, trees splintering under the force. But the shadows were relentless. They coiled around his limbs, dragging him down. The Jinchuriki loomed, their fists descending like a hammer. Naruto roared, his chakra exploding outward in a crimson burst. The shockwave shattered the shadows, sending the Puppetmaster skidding back. For the first time, their mask of calm cracked. Impressive, they hissed. But you're still outmatched. The Jinchuriki's body convulsed, their skin cracking as their beast's power surged, a partial transformation. Claws tore through their fingers, their mouths stretching into a fang maw. Naruto's stomach dropped. He had to end this fast. Gathering every ounce of his strength, he charged, his body a blur of golden light. The Puppetmaster's laughter filled the air as the shadows and the beast converged on him. The battle had only just begun. The air crackled with tension as Naruto's orange jacket flapped in the wind, his cerulean eyes locked onto the shadowy figure before him. The Puppetmaster, draped in tattered robes, flicked his fingers, and the ground itself seemed to writhe as inky tendrils lashed out like serpents. Behind him, the Jinchuriki, a hulking figure with veins pulsing under pale skin, let out a guttural roar, chakra flaring like a storm. Naruto didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, weaving hand signs with practiced speed. Shadow Clone Jutsu. A dozen copies erupted around him, each darting in different directions to flank the enemy. The Puppetmaster smirked, his own hands dancing in response. The shadows coiled, forming jagged spears that skewered 3 clones in an instant. But Naruto was already in the air, spinning mid-leap to avoid a swipe from the Jinchuriki's massive arm. The brute's fist cratered the earth where Naruto had stood seconds before. Damn, they're fast, Naruto grunted, landing in a crouch. He could feel Kurama's chakra simmering beneath his skin, begging to be unleashed. But he held back, he needed to gauge their limits first. The Puppetmaster wasn't just controlling shadows, he was merging with them, his body flickering in and out of darkness like a wraith. Meanwhile, the Jinchuriki's raw power was overwhelming, every strike sending shockwaves through the battlefield. Naruto's clones regrouped, forming a tight circle. Rasengan, they shouted in unison, each thrusting a swirling sphere of chakra toward the Jinchuriki. The beast snarled, crossing its arms to block, but the impact sent it skidding back, its feet carving trenches in the dirt. Seizing the opening, Naruto's real body dashed toward the Puppetmaster, kunai drawn. The shadow wielder's grin widened as he dissolved into the darkness, reappearing behind Naruto in a blur. A shadowy blade arced toward his spine. Gotcha! Naruto twisted at the last second, his own kunai clashing against the shadow weapon. Sparks flew as the two locked eyes, inches apart. You're not the only one who's been training, Naruto growled. With a burst of strength, he kicked off, flipping backward as he formed another hand sign. Wind style, gale palm. A razor-sharp gust sliced through the shadows, forcing the Puppetmaster to retreat. But the fight was far from over. The Jinchuriki recovered with a roar, its body surging with cursed energy. Black markings spread across its skin as it entered a deeper state of transformation. Naruto's stomach dropped. This wasn't just any Jinchuriki. This one was nearing full-tailed beast mode. Kurama, I need more power, Naruto muttered. The fox's voice rumbled in his mind. Took you long enough. Red chakra erupted around him, forming a fiery cloak. His senses sharpened, his speed tripled, and the world seemed to slow. The Jinchuriki charged, but Naruto was ready. He met the beast head-on, their fists colliding with a shockwave that shattered nearby boulders. The Puppetmaster, however, wasn't idle. From the edges of the battlefield, his shadow slithered, forming intricate seals. The ground trembled as a massive shadow construct, a monstrous, multi-armed puppet, rose from the earth. Its hollow eyes locked onto Naruto, and it struck with terrifying precision, its limbs moving like whips. Naruto gritted his teeth. He couldn't fight both at once, not like this. He needed a new strategy. Channeling Kurama's chakra, he formed a massive Rasengan, but this time, he infused it with wind nature. The sphere crackled with energy, growing larger, wilder. Let's see how you handle this. He hurled it at the shadow puppet, the force of the blast tearing through its torso. The construct screeched as it dissolved into smoke. But the Puppetmaster wasn't done. With a snarl, he merged fully with the shadows, becoming a living nightmare. He surged forward, his body elongating, twisting, striking from impossible angles. Naruto barely dodged, but a shadowy tendril grazed his arm, sending a numbing chill through his muscles. Poison? No, worse. It was sapping his chakra. The Jinchuriki seized the moment, slamming a fist into Naruto's ribs. The impact sent him flying, his body skidding across the ground. Blood trickled from his lips, but he forced himself up. He could feel Kurama's anger boiling over. Enough playing around, the fox snarled. Naruto's eyes flashed. Yeah. Time to end this. His chakra flared violently, the red cloak intensifying into a shimmering golden aura. 6 tails of pure energy lashed behind him as he entered a new state, the pinnacle of his power. The battlefield trembled as Naruto shot forward, a golden blur. The Jinchuriki swung, but Naruto caught its fist midair, his grip unbreakable. With a roar, he hurled the beast into the sky, then blasted after it with a Rasengan charged with enough force to level mountains. The Jinchuriki screamed as the attack connected, its body plummeting back to earth like a meteor. The Puppetmaster, sensing the tide turning, tried to flee into the shadows. But Naruto was faster. In an instant, he was behind him, his hand glowing with a miniature Rasen shuriken. This ends now. He thrust the spinning disc into the Puppetmaster's back. The explosion of wind and chakra tore through the shadows, purging the darkness in a blinding burst of light. Silence. Naruto dropped to one knee, panting as his golden aura faded. The Jinchuriki lay motionless, its cursed markings receding. The Puppetmaster's body dissolved into smoke, leaving only a whisper on the wind. It was over. But as Naruto stood, wiping blood from his chin, he knew the real battle was just beginning. Somewhere out there, the mastermind behind this fight was waiting. And next time, he'd be ready. The air crackled with chakra as Naruto's Rasengan collided with the Puppetmaster's shadow-infused blade, sending shockwaves rippling through the battlefield. Dust and debris swirled around them, obscuring vision, but Naruto's cerulean eyes burned with determination. Across from him, the Puppetmaster, cloaked in swirling shadows, his fingers dancing like spiders on invisible strings, grinned through the chaos. You're outmatched, Jinchuriki, he hissed, his voice layered with the echoes of 100 puppets. Behind him, the captured Jinchuriki writhed in agony, their chakra being siphoned into the Puppetmaster's grotesque amalgamation of shadow and steel. Naruto gritted his teeth, feeling the weight of exhaustion pressing down on him. His muscles screamed, his chakra reserves dwindling, but he couldn't afford to falter, not when the fate of his friends and the entire shinobi world hung in the balance. "I don't care how strong you think you are," Naruto growled, his voice raw with defiance. "I'll never give up on my friends." With a burst of speed, he lunged forward, weaving hand signs mid-air. Shadow Clone Jutsu. A dozen copies materialized around him, each one charging with Rasengan's blazing. The Puppetmaster sneered, flicking his wrists. From the ground, shadowy tendrils lashed out, impaling the clones one by one, but Naruto was already moving, his real body darting beneath the onslaught. Sweat dripped from his brow as he closed the distance, his mind racing. He had to break the Puppetmaster's control over the Jinchuriki, free them from the shadows binding their will. A memory flashed of Kurama's voice, gruff but reassuring. "You've got more than just my power, kid. You've got theirs too." Naruto's eyes widened. The other Jinchuriki, their chakra was still connected to him, even now. If he could reach them, maybe together they could. A searing pain erupted in his side as a shadow blade grazed him, snapping him back to reality. He stumbled, blood soaking his orange jacket, but he forced himself to stand. The Puppetmaster loomed, his puppets reassembling into a monstrous, multi-limbed construct. "Pathetic," the man spat. "You cling to bonds like a child, but they only make you weak." Naruto's fists clenched. "You're wrong," he said, his voice low but unwavering. "They're what make me strong." With a roar, he reached deep within himself, calling not just to Kurama but to the chakra of every Jinchuriki he'd ever connected with. One by one, their voices answered, a chorus of defiance against the Puppetmaster's control. The air around Naruto shimmered as golden chakra erupted from his body, forming a radiant cloak that pulsed with raw power. The Puppetmaster's smirk faltered. "Impossible." Naruto didn't give him time to finish. In a blur of motion, he vanished, reappearing above the Puppetmaster with a Rasengan the size of a boulder, swirling with the combined might of all 9 Baijuo. The Puppetmaster barely had time to raise his arms before the attack connected, the force of it sending him crashing into the earth. The shockwave shattered his puppets, their shadowy bonds dissolving into mist. The Jinchuriki collapsed, gasping as their wills were finally their own again. The Puppetmaster struggled to rise, his body broken, his shadows fading. "This isn't over," he wheezed, but the fire in his eyes was dimming. Naruto stood over him, panting, his own strength nearly spent. "Yeah, it is," he said softly. "You don't have to live like this, alone, controlling others because you're afraid of being weak. There's another way." For a moment, silence hung between them. Then, the Puppetmaster's shoulders sagged, his defiance crumbling into something like regret. The battlefield fell still. In the aftermath, the freed Jinchuriki gathered, their expressions a mix of relief and exhaustion. The Puppetmaster, now stripped of his power, was taken into custody, not with hatred, but with the understanding that even he could change. As the sun rose over the scarred land, Naruto turned to his friends, a tired but genuine smile on his face. "We did it," he said simply. And though the battle was won, the world had shifted. The bonds between Jinchuriki, once strained by fear and mistrust, had been reforged in the crucible of conflict. A new era dawned, one where cooperation, not control, would define the future. Naruto wiped the blood from his lip, gazing at the horizon. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but as long as they stood together, he knew they'd face whatever came next. And that was enough.